What's up, everyone? Lance Hedrick here, and today we're going to go over turbo shots. So what are turbo shots? These are those espresso shots that made the world turn upside down last year when a specific paper that was written by Michael Cameron, Dr. Christopher Hendon, and some mathematicians came out and discussed 7-second to 15-second shots that supposedly had as higher extractions than traditional espresso extractions. Now, before we jump into that, I first want to read to you that I have written on my nifty little V60 filter, the historical definition as defined by the SCA of espresso. An espresso is a 25 to 35 milliliter beverage prepared from 7 to 9 grams of ground coffee made with water heated to 92 to 95 degrees Celsius, forced through the granular bed under 9 to 10 bar of static water pressure and a total flow time of 20 to 30 seconds. Now, reading that, I know that the majority of you watching understand that this is way outdated. Very few people in the world are still pulling their espresso like this. In fact, I would say that probably an average a parameter for espresso extraction in a typical cafe would be something like 20 grams in, 40 grams out, in around 25 or 30 seconds, right? I'm sure that you all can sympathize with that type of extraction. Yet, this is the historical definition. And since then, we've been questioning every single thing about it. Since then, we've questioned time. We have people pulling 35, 40, 50-second shots, like with the Slayer shots or different things like that. We have people questioning bars. We have people who are doing, 6, 7, 8, 9 bar extractions, pre-infusions with lower bars of extraction. We have people playing with temperature, a higher temperature for lighter roasts, lower temperature for lower roasts. So we have these things that we're calling into question. But something that we haven't quite called into question is how the extraction is actually looking, okay? And that is going to be something that's going to just mess with your minds during this, is turbo shots don't look pretty. Now, before continuing, I'm going to make a quick plea, because statistically, when I look on the back end of YouTube, it shows that when I do this, it works. So if you have a second, hit that subscribe button right now. That would be fantastic for me. The more subscribers I get, the more authority my channel gets, the more I'm able to get this equipment and different things like that to make more and more videos. Anyway, would appreciate that. If not, no worries. All right. So let's start at the very beginning, because it's a very good place to start, like do, re, mi, 1, 2, 3, ABC. So how did this even begin? How did these people, how did Dr. Hendon and Michael Cameron come to this idea of reformulating espresso completely to make these shots? And just real quick, so you have an idea, the paper argues for around 7 to 15-second shots, about 15 grams in, around 40 grams out, so around a 1 to 3 ratio, a little less. But yeah, in about 7 to 15 seconds with your OPV set at 6 bars. Okay, so you're getting a low pressure shot that's super fast. It's going to look ugly, but supposedly you're going to get a just as high or higher extraction than with your traditional espresso, and you're going to get a really sweet a shot of espresso that is extraordinarily consistent from shot to shot. All right, so that's just real quick. I'll go more into that in a bit, but I just wanted to give you, for those who haven't heard of this, who haven't seen those crazy papers, which we'll throw it right now while I'm talking. Look, here's one paper, here's another paper, here's another article. That's kind of what's been going on, are these claims of, you've been doing espresso wrong your whole life. What is this espresso? Well, that's a little snapshot before we really dive deep into it. Anyway, back to the point at hand. What motivated them to do this? Well, there's a paper I'll link in the caption that Michael Cameron wrote. It's more like a blog post where he talks about the inception of this idea. He starts it by saying, I think it was January of 2016, he was sitting somewhere and received a picture of a glass of rosé that Dr. Hendon was drinking, and Dr. Hendon said something about, I'm drinking rosé. And Michael Cameron's response was something like, cool, I lowered the pressure on my machine lately to 6 bars and it tastes fantastic. And Dr. Hendon's response was, let's write a paper about it. And 4 years later, they essentially, the mathematicians came in, they formulated their theory, they corroborated with these mathematicians, and they wrote this paper that came out early in 2020. So it all just started with an off-the-cuff, I set my machine to 6 bars and it tasted good. And then they really began to dive into what makes espresso good, how can we increase consistency of espresso, how can we make it sweet with a high extraction and a drinkable strength, drinkable TDS, and this is where the paper came from. So now, as I dive into the actual paper and some of the contents, I want to explain that, and by the way, if you see me looking down, it's because I have notes, because this is a peer-reviewed paper that I am deconstructing. I discussed with Dr. Hendon and Michael Cameron last night, throughout the evening, about essentially my interpretation and what they want to see in this video. So just so you all know, I have their stamps of approval. So what I'm saying, unless I, speak too quickly and it's misunderstood, is given the stamp of approval by them. And I'll put their information in the caption below. Anyway, I'm referencing an outline that I wrote because I put a lot of work into this. So, what I'm doing in this is not a regurgitation of the paper. Simply, I am trying to dilute it for the masses so that you don't have to go and read this extremely heady paper that took me a while to read. I've read it a few times now, but it's filled with mathematical models that are quite difficult to understand unless you have, college-level math courses that help you understand it. So the mathematicians came in after they had been playing with all these different shots, and they found a lot of let's say discoveries. And one of the first things they found was this volcano effect. And I'm going to draw this with my finger, and hopefully I'm doing this the right way, but we're going to trace it. They found a volcano effect, which meant if the y-axis and x-axis, if on the y-axis you had extraction yield, and on the x-axis you had fine to coarse grinding. So with that, they found a volcano effect where it went, when you were at the finest and at the lowest extraction was about here. And then as you kept going coarser, the extraction was going up and up and up, and then it would plateau, and then it started to go down. And the plateau is very small, not much of a plateau. Anyway, their graph, which we'll put in here as well, is more like an upside-down V, but they call that the volcano effect, which was surprising and counterintuitive because what typically we're taught is the finer you go, the more surface area is exposed, the more you can extract. Now, that is a blanket thing that is largely accurate, but with everything, it's to an extent. Yes, the finer you go, the more surface area is exposed, but there is an extent to which it's going to give you more. All right? In the opposite direction, the coarser you go, the more it's going to extract if you're starting at that traditional fine setting. The more you go coarse, the more it's going to extract until it starts to plummet from being too coarse. All right? So what they discovered is with finer grind settings, you have less consistency, though you can get a high extraction yield. When you get to the other side, if you're on the uptake and you're about halfway there, you can mimic it with a coarse grind, get the same extraction yield, but it'll be a lot more repeatable. All right, so you got that volcano. All right, so you have the same extraction yields with really fine and really coarse, but you'll get a more repeatable shot on the coarse side. They also discovered that, and we'll put the graph here. There's actually a graph. I don't know why I'm trying to do this with my finger. Here's the graph that we'll overlay right here of what it looks like between 6-bar shots and 9-bar shots. As you see, for each grind size, the 6-bar shot has a higher extraction yield than the 9-bar shot. So they also found that not only is 6-bar espresso profiling more effective with extraction, but it's also more consistent. All right, so you have coarser grinds, lower pressure for the extraction, and you're getting a lot more consistent results and a higher extraction yield. All right, so what they also discovered was that time in extraction, which is a variable of extraction, which I discussed in my espresso series, linked right there. What they discussed, or what they figured out, was time is a dependent variable. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, simply, in overly simplistic terms, what that means is if you have a really fine grind setting and you have, let's say, a 30-second shot and you do 20% extraction, if you go coarse, you can get as high of an extraction or higher in less time. So, in this regard, less time is giving you more extraction. So it's dependent on the other variables. It's not an independent variable, right? Like, for instance, for the most part, water would be an independent variable. The more water you push through, the more you're going to extract until there's nothing really to extract left. That may not give you a great shot, but you could get a really high extraction by pelting it with a ton of water. All right, so that's an example of like an independent variable. The dependent variable would be time in this situation. These mathematicians, which their names are, because I want to give them credit, William Lee and Jamie Foster from the University of Portsmouth in the UK, they Dr. Hendon and them were in contact, and they had these mathematical equations that they had been using for filter coffee, and they began to do them for espresso, where they could predict essentially what's going on in extraction. Now, when they began to compare their results mathematically with the results of Dr. Hendon and Michael Cameron, there was a difference there. And here's a graph to show that. All right, I'm overlaying it on the screen right now. All right, so the difference here is ideally what is going on in the espresso puck should have been a super high extraction the finer you go. But what Dr. Hendon and Michael Cameron found out is that actually at that really fine grind setting, the extraction was really low. Now, why is that? Well, the idea was this was clogging, essentially. So what they found out is water was not going through the puck perfectly and extracting everything perfectly as the extraction model, the mathematical model, would suggest. Instead, what they surmised is that parts of that bed were severely under-extracted. Parts of the bed were extracted really well. And parts of the bed were arguably not really even extracted at all. So their extraction percentage, which a quick side note on refractometry, is refractions are essentially an average of all the extraction going on. It doesn't give us a really good idea of where those extractions came from. You can have a 20% extraction and 5% of that bed could be 30% extracted, 20% could be 28% extracted, and the rest could be like 16% extracted. But it would say 20% because it's taken into account the sections that are really highly and really efficiently extracted, whereas the rest is really inefficiently extracted. So what they discovered is that's what was going on. They were getting low extractions on these really finely ground coffees because there was uneven extraction, really uneven extraction. And the finer they went, the more uneven it became. So they were not lining up with this mathematical model. They got closer and closer, though, the coarser they went, because the extraction was more and more even. The flow was more evenly pushing through that puck. Make sense? Okay. Now, I'm just going to take a quick break just to be like, we have a lot more left. So if you need to pause and come back to this later, that's cool, because this is a lot. You know, this is again a peer-reviewed scientific paper that looking at a lot of stuff. So trying to oversimplify it by just saying a turbo shot is this recipe doesn't really give it justice, because people are going to try it and they're going to be turned off. So I want to give you the reasoning behind this. It wasn't a haphazard, let's just crank up that coarse grind, let's yeet the espresso until it's good to go. Which, in reality, that is what's going on. But I wanted to give background. So feel free to take a break, go grab some snacks, come back on and join me for the rest of this feature film. All right, so the practice wasn't matching the mathematical model. So they figured out what was going on. Obviously, it's impossible to really pinpoint the pockets and seeing exactly what's happening, other than the fact that water's lazy, wants to run the path of least resistance. The finer it is, the harder that is to go through evenly, and so it decides to take little paths, and you have what they call clogging. All right. So the results of this study was, and I said this briefly earlier, but the results of the study were the coarser they were going, the higher their extraction kept showing to be, and they were getting their minds blown about this. And the same thing with pressure. With that 6-bar pressure, that extraction was going up. And on top of all of that, with those two things combined, they found that they had a lot more repeatability. Now, you can get a really nice 20% extraction in that typical ratio of 20 in, 40 out, in 30 seconds. You can get an incredible espresso, but try doing it 10 times in a row. That's going to be the issue. The variability is really, really high. Whenever you go coarser, think about it, the water will move through all of it a lot more easily. It's not as difficult. The puck preparation is not as paramount. It's still paramount. Don't mishear me and skewer me in the comments. It's still of critical importance, but it's not nearly as important as it is when it's super fine. There's a lot of clumps. There's a lot of grouping together of these hydrophobic coffee grounds. So keep in mind that the puck preparation is still of paramount importance, but it's less important when it's really coarse, which allows you more grace, essentially. All right, so they found out with these things that you were able to get more consistency. So when you're on the other side of the volcano, there's a lot more consistency and the same extraction yield. And you can down dose and get just as high as extractions as you do with higher doses. Now, there's been a lot of backlash to this way of pulling espresso. There are people who are saying, oh, it's too weak, oh, it's whatever. Now, I enjoy turbo shots. I think they're great. I think they're really easy to dial in. Once you get the hang of it, once you get the flow of it, you get that if you understand pressure is not the end-all be-all. It's actually the flow of the water going through the puck. Okay, finger guns. Yeah, so people are like, oh, it tastes like an upcharged Nespresso pod. It's like weak espresso. It's watery. Blah, 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 blah. In my Instagram DMs with Dr. Hendon, he was talking about how this has never really been covered. So in a typical 20 gram in, 40 gram out, and 30 seconds shot of espresso, you're going to have some parts of it that say extract about 25%, some parts at around 15%, and a lot of it are like 20%. And so the overall aggregate of those numbers is about 20%. See, what your refractometer is going to say is like 20%. But when you're tasting it, maybe those components at that 25% range are what really, make your palate excited. And you're wanting to replicate that for the whole experience. So you're trying to down dose to increase your extraction. You go down to 16 grams. Now, ideally what should happen is you get, 16 grams, you get a 25% extraction. You're still going to get the 4 grams of your final of your dose in your final cup that's been extracted, similar to a 20% extraction at 20 grams. That would be 4 grams extracted, right? So it's the same amount extracted. What you should be able to do is get that 25%, 10 TDS, right? That's how the mathematics works there, right? So you should be able to get that 25% for the whole puck. But what's happening is people aren't able to get those 25%. They're getting 22, 23%, something around there. And they're upset with the strength because it's not matching that 10 TDS of the original shot. So what he surmises, what he is hypothesizing, is instead of thinking, if you're really caring about the strength, the drinking strength of your beverage, instead of thinking, let's start at like 20 gram dose and let's go down, is he's saying you need to start at 1 gram. Okay, not really, that's hyperbole, but start low and work your way up. You start low and you maximize extraction, and you slowly work up, maximizing extraction to your taste preference until you hit where it's at that max extraction and the taste concentration that you're wanting. All right? So what that looked like in the paper is closer to, about 15 in, 40 out, and 7 to 15 seconds. All right? Now, that's kind of it for the paper. I wanted to kind of go over what they were actually talking about, because there's been a lot of misrepresentations, especially all those silly news articles that came out. So I wanted to kind of just briefly go over, I say briefly, we know I'm not brief ever. Brevity is not a strong suit of mine. But yeah, I wanted to go over all of that. Now I'm going to kind of get into where this recipe has developed, or what it's developed into. Nowadays, like I was talking with Michael Cameron again last night, and he was telling me that he now, for the most part, pulls shots under the threshold of 20 seconds. That 7 to 15 was on the lower end. He says he's found the most consistency and the most tasty shots between 12 and 18 seconds. And that the most important thing is not necessarily pressure. Pressure is kind of a red herring because, and I'm going to pull a shot in a second, but when you put 6 bars of pressure, the fact of the matter is that puck is going to be eroding throughout the shot. So the flow of the water going through cannot maintain 6 bars of pressure the whole way if that puck is eroding, right? Does that make sense? So that 6 bar is more so a threshold for where the machine won't go past. Make sense? That's why sometimes if you're watching, let's say you have a Breville dual boiler that has the pressure gauge on the front, that's why sometimes you may see it start at 9 and then it goes down to like 7. As that puck is losing its peak resistance, the pump is not going to be able to push 9 bars because there's nothing there to give the resistance back. And that's the issue with going super fine on your grind setting. That puck is a restrictor. And when you go too fine, it's too good of a restrictor. And the water is not able to really get through, right? So you don't really want to force... you don't want to force that pressure onto the puck. What's more important is ensuring that you have a really nice flow rate going through the puck. So around 4.5 grams per second, 5 grams per second, something around there if you have the ability to flow profile. Now, so pressure is kind of a red herring. It's not as important as ensuring you're not going into a super high pressure because they saw 6 bar had higher extraction yields than 9 bar. Okay, so don't get caught up on the pressure. If you can change your OPV on your machine to 6, that's great. That way it doesn't go over. But yeah, that flow rate is what's most important, and ensuring that you have coarse enough grinds for it to flow through nice and evenly. All right, So he's doing mostly 20 seconds and under shots, and sometimes, 13-second shots, 14-second shots can taste ideal, supreme. And as far as the dose goes, 15 is kind of where he likes to stay. But you can do pretty much anything under 19, 20 grams is going to work really well at a 1-to-3 or so ratio. All right, so I'll be doing 17 in, 51 out in 20 seconds in a second when I pull my shot. On top of all this, Michael Cameron also brings up that past 20 seconds is when you start to get those compounds that extract, or insolubles that come out, but mostly compounds that are extracting, I would venture to say, that are unpleasant, that can override the fruity and chocolatey and sweet notes that you've been working hard in those 20 seconds to achieve. So going over 20 is not ideal when doing that course of a grind. Now, I know you're thinking, well, if we just keep running the time, won't the extraction just keep going up? Well, on paper, sure, but not necessarily, because maybe at that point, because it is coarse, maybe it is, for the most part, just running through channels or something like that. But the idea is you are able to get as higher of an extraction in less time than you could in more time with a finer grind. All right, that's what I'm trying to get you to take away. It's that volcano type thing, okay? So I know it's going to be very weird trying one of these shots, and I'm not advocating this is what you should always do. I'm not advocating this is the best. I'm just giving you an idea of how to do this properly so you can give it a fair shot. Pun intended. Or was it? I don't know. So with these, it's going to look ugly. It's going to be a gusher. You're going to be like, this can't be right. This can't be right. I promise you, it's right. I'm going to show you on here. As long as you're doing 6 bars and less, you're doing a decent flow rate through that portafilter, and you're getting around 3 times the weight in less than 20 seconds, you're doing it correctly. All right. So, let's go ahead and pull a shot. All right. So I'm actually using a 17-gram dose because I don't have a 15-gram basket, and Michael recommends to use the basket that matches your dose. And since I don't have that, I'm going with 17 grams. All right. Now I'm going to WDT it. If you don't know what that is, I've linked above my video on it. Alrighty. And it's also good to note that in their experimentation, they used a Sanremo Opera for their espresso. They used an EK43 for their grinder, and they used gear pumps as well as Akai scales. And I don't remember if I said this, but they used a puck press in order to ensure that they had consistent tamp pressure and consistent evenness of their tamping. All right, so I have my flow profile set up. I have the pressure set at 6 bars so it doesn't go over 6. And so I have it so it'll turn off at 51 grams, which is 3 times the weight of my dose, and it should be happening in less than 20 seconds. Now, I'm going to have you watch 2 things. We're going to look at the graph going on, as well as the shot, just so that you can see essentially how ugly it is, so that you're not freaking out when you try this and notice that it's ugly as homemade sin. All right, so we're going to go with it. Ready, and go. Now, as you watch, once this kicks on, it takes a second as it's getting water ready. Once it kicks on, you're going to see a green line, and that's pressure. That's kind of what we're going to follow. And you'll see blue, which is the flow rate in milliliters per second. So there's blue, flow rate's coming out quickly as it's saturating the puck. And then here's the pressure. It's shot up to about 6.5, and it's leveling off at 6. So as you see, it's at 6. That shot's coming out quickly as you shoot down here. There's little sprays going on, but it's A-okay. And as you see, there we go. We're staying at that 6 bar, and right at 19 seconds we finish. So if you can zoom in and see, right here it says 19 seconds total. All right, so no pre-infusion, 19 seconds right at 6 bar, and we hit 51 grams right on the dot. I don't know if you can see this, but literally on the dot, 50.9, it's oscillating to 51. So we have that 1 to 3. We did it in 19 seconds right at 6 bars. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a try. This is a Columbia Geisha from Onyx Coffee Lab. All righty. So the idea here, some of the ideas also that I was discussing with these gents and with some people in a Discord that I'll talk about in a second, is that these shots tend to give you more volatile aromatics and like vibrancy. They tend to give less body, yes, but you can get same concentration if you with the right grinder and with the right preparation and technique. So you'll be able to get a similar strength, but it'll taste way differently. It should be sweeter, a lot more flavor clarity, really nice high aromatics. All in all, a really tasty shot. So let's give this a try. Again, No pun intended on tasty shot. Smells delicious. Lots of like baked peach. Holy cow. Some cinnamon. Honestly, a little vanilla. That's fantastic. I'm not just saying that either. To be honest with you, I've been pulling turbos a lot the last few days, and they're quickly turning into one of my favorites just because how easy they are. Cleanup's kind of annoying, so if that's something that gets on your nerve, I've heard that an Aeropress filter or some sort of V60 cut filter for the base of your portafilter helps clean it up. That does affect the hydraulic pressure, and I'll put Jonathan Gagne's blog post in the caption below if you're curious about that. But cleanup's kind of a mess unless you have spouted portafilter or potentially you use some sort of filter at the base of your puck. Now, this is, however, delicious. Oh my goodness, the vibrancy of the fruit is unlike any quote-unquote traditional shot I've had. This isn't hating traditional shots. Fact of the matter is, people like Scott Rayo and Jonathan Gagne and different people are doing some incredible things with really finely ground coffees. A lot of the decent profiles are set up for really finely ground coffees. You can get a really nice high even extraction, but it takes a lot longer. It's not very repeatable. You'll get like one good shot out of every 2 or 3. Even Gagne in his posts talks about the difficulties of it. When you get a good shot though with that really finely ground coffee, you can get a really high extraction. And Rayo showed this with the blooming espresso, where you're essentially doing a high flow rate water to drench the bed for a blooming phase, where you cut the valve off for 30 seconds and you're doing a bloom, and then you cut that back on for a really low flow rate of around 3 or 4 grams per second. And what happens is you are really able to get like 20, 24, 25, 26% extractions, sometimes higher depending on how nice your grinder is. Now with this, you're going to be able to get really nice high extractions that are equivalent to traditional espressos with your same exact equipment, but it's going to be a lot more repeatable. And I think that the flavor profile you might like better, you might not. I'm not here to tell you this is an ultimate thing. I'm here to just explain how these work, how the paper should be interpreted, as well as connect you with the people who wrote it in the caption below. You can check out their Instagram, shoot them a message. Sorry, Chris and Michael, hope you might get blown up, we'll see. But yeah, so give this a try. Now I wanted to wrap this video up, I wanted to talk about a Discord where I first really saw people implementing these shots. I'd read the paper over a year ago for the first time and wasn't really interested in it just because, like everyone else, seeing 7 to 15 shots blew my mind. Oh, and it should be noted that Dr. Hendon was telling me he thinks it was around 10 or 11 seconds where they started to hit 20% extraction. Imagine that, 10 to 11 seconds with a 20% extraction yield. That's shocking. But they were still getting great espresso at 7, 8, 9 seconds. Granted, it was not a traditional shot. Anyway, I wanted to discuss this Discord. It's called Espresso Aficionado Discord. They have some very impressive conversations going on there that I've gleaned a lot from. And I actually talked to some of them as well as 2 of the authors of this paper to hear their kind of side of what's important to talk about with turbo shots. And one of the things that one of the people in it, username ShaySub, said is that if you're having issues with like really light roasts, what you can do is what someone named Joe D kind of came up with on a decent, he set a profile up where you can do a blooming turbo shot, where essentially you throw on that, you open the valve all the way for the first 3 or so seconds to get that puck fully saturated, then you close the valve all the way until the pressure drops to about 2 bars of pressure, and then you open it back up to about 5 milliliters a second of water debit so that you can still finish in less than 20 seconds, get that 1-to-3 ratio. So it's one way that I was seeing people in there being innovative on top of this paper to figure out ways to allow it to work with more things, because obviously this works best with really soluble coffees. It tastes really great with lightly roasted coffees. With really lightly roasted coffees, Nordic roasts and the like, you may want to try the blooming turbo shot, which I just outlined there. They also have this great wiki type form thing where you can go and look at different entries, and I'm going to put below their profiling entry that I highly recommend you click on to read through if you're confused about the term water debit or about blooming or anything like that. It's really well written by one of the, and I know recently a contributor named Shotwell on there updated a lot of it, so it's really up-to-date information. Give that a check. Anyway, that is turbo shots in a nutshell. Obviously, I didn't go into the deep mathematical models of the situation that was able to predict what's happening in the espresso extraction, but I have it linked in the caption below. I'm going to have essentially a bibliography down there, works cited. Go read it if you're interested in it. I'm also putting Michael Cameron's blog post, which is kind of a very digestible overlook of the whole process. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about it, feel free to drop a comment. But also, I have Christopher Hendon and Michael Cameron's Instagram below. Maybe you can shoot them a message, or maybe you can, reach out to some of these people in the Espresso Aficionado Discord and discuss turbos. It's a fun shot. There are a lot of other style shots that I'll cover in future videos. But for now, if you enjoyed this video, if you've made it this far, you're a real one. I don't know what this was. I was gonna finger gun. I was like, I've done that 8 times in this video. But yeah, I would appreciate a like, a positive comment. If you didn't like it, feel free to do a negative comment, whatever you want to do. But I hope that this, helps you in your understanding of those crazy clickbaity articles that came out a year or so ago. Yeah. So anyway. And if you're just confused overall and you don't know anything about espresso extraction, feel free to check out my parts 1 and 2 super simplified, dumbed down espresso extraction guide. As I go forward, I'll do some more of the advanced stuff like this turbo shot, and we'll look more at the decent espresso machine in the future because I think this is, an incredible machine. Anyway, that's it for me today. Some of y'all have been asking for these 30-minute long videos. Well, there you go. There's another one. Love you all. And I think that is... Oh, one last thing I wanted to mention. Sorry, this is dragging on a little bit more. I do have a Patreon. I would highly, I would love it if you'd consider joining it. I have a Discord with that Patreon where I'm very, very active. I check it all the time throughout the day and am corresponding with people all over the place. It would be awesome if you want to join it. That's also in the caption below. Anyway, you all rock. And I'm gonna enjoy the rest of this turbo shot and see ya.